So ma'am, I hope it's visible.
Yeah.
Okay. So ma'am, here you can start off, ma'am.
Okay. A very good afternoon to all the audiences who are here with me. And I thank Jay Mitra for giving me this opportunity in their monthly seminar. I'll be speaking on thyroid disorders and lifestyle habits, challenges, and remedies. Please change. Will I be able to change the slides?
No, ma'am. From here only it will be happening, ma'am. So I have changed
Okay.
this slide for you.
Yeah. Thyroid, as you all know, in Latin is known as glandular thyroid. It is the most labile and the most vital endocrine gland that we possess, and it is approachable also. Therefore, FNSC procedure, as you all know, can be done on this gland. And this is one gland which is subjected to lot number of disorders because it is one endocrine gland which controls several, almost all functions, all organs in the body. Next. Next slide, please. This is the most vital endocrine ductless gland. As I mentioned earlier, that it controls the entire metabolism and maturation of the human body. It is located in front of the neck, just in front of the trachea and larynx, and it extracts iodine from the blood and incorporates into the thyroid hormone. Next. This is the microscopic picture which pathologists and various students must have seen under the microscope. This shows that how the gland is composed of numerous, almost similar sized follicles when the gland is normal. And these follicles are lined by flattened cuboidal cells. The lumen of the follicles consists of a gelatinous proteinaceous material colloid. This is the next slide, which shows how the follicles come together and they form a lobule. So the thyroid gland is made up of lobules, which are separated by interlobular connective tissue. Next. It is very important that we understand the physiology or the functioning of the thyroid gland because it has a very well-controlled hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, which generates the hormones and their functioning. If we understand the basic functioning of the gland, we will understand the thyroid disorders easily. So, to begin with the functioning, the hypothalamic hormone regulates the pituitary, and pituitary in turn regulates the thyroid to release the well-formed thyroid hormones in the bloodstream. Next. This diagram will emphasize the functioning, how the hypothalamus, the paraventricular nuclei from the hypothalamus, they release the thyrotropin regulating hormone, which acts on the thyrotrop cells of the anterior pituitary, which then releases thyroid stimulating hormone. This hormone acts on the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland releases thyroxine, that is T4, and triiodothyronine, that is T3. These are the thyroid hormones. The thyroxine then, by means of feedback mechanism, controls the pituitary and the hypothalamus. This is the natural brake system or the negative feedback loop, which maintains complete homeostasis, so the level of hormones is maintained in the human body. Next. A bit detail about thyroid hormone synthesis. As you all know, that the thyroid follicular cell secretes the protein thyroglobin. Also, it collects iodine from the bloodstream by means of sodium iodide symporter or co-transporter pump. Iodine has a very important role in the formation of mature thyroid hormones T3 and T4. This iodide that is entered into the follicle, it undergoes oxidation and iodinium is formed. This iodinium binds with the tyrosine residues which are present in the thyroglobulin, and it forms by means of conjugation forms monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine, which again enters the thyroid follicles, and T3 and T4 hormones are formed, which are then released into the bloodstream, and it is supplied to the peripheral tissues as and when required. Coming on to the diseases proper, thyroid disorders are extremely common. We can call them omnipresent. They are seen in all ages and at any and every individual, be it a child, an infant, or even in the fetus. It can be present at birth. Usually it presents as congenital hypothyroidism, can present as disorders in females after menopause or in elderly. As per 2018 studies, 42 million Indians are reported to have some or the other thyroid disorder, and of these, hypothyroidism is the commonest. Next slide. Next slide, please. By means of this picture, I'm trying to emphasize that thyroid disorders are the diseases of the civilization. The science and technology has provided us with a lot of facilities, but along with it, we are now facing many disorders, thyroid being one of them. As you can see, the consumption of vegetable oil, fats, junk foods, smoking, alcohol consumption, gluten-rich diets, iodine, be it high or low, sedentary lifestyle, and poor stress controls are associated with thyroid disorders. Next slide. Likewise, few conditions as seen in this slide are risks for hyperthyroidism, be it injury or trauma to thyroid, psychological illnesses, smoking, and history of medications where iodine levels become high or low. Also, if there is a family history of thyroid, then the patient is more prone to get thyroid. Comorbid conditions, especially the autoimmune conditions, as you can see in the list, pernicious anemia, type 1 diabetes. Medications which are rich in iodine, such as amiodarone, which is an anti-arrhythmic drug. Higher elderly population, 60 plus, especially females, and patients who have already had some form of treatment of thyroid condition or cancer, or thyroidectomy or radio ablation of thyroid are prone to get thyroid disorders. Next slide. Often on this question keeps coming and propping up that thyroid disorders and its high incidence is women. Is there a relation? Yes. There are women who are frequent sufferers from the thyroid disorders, and the studies are trying to correlate its relation with autoimmunity. Since several of the thyroid disorders are autoimmune, and autoimmunity presents more in females, be it Graves' disease, be it Hashimoto's, OADS, etc. They have an autoimmune basis. Likewise, the hormonal changes, the females are prone to several stages of hormonal changes, especially high flux that is reported during menarche, pregnancy, menopause. Hence, they are the sufferers of thyroid disorders much more than males. Besides this, genetic, environmental, and other conditions also promote thyroid disorders. It is said that 1 in 8 female will present with some thyroid disorder during her lifetime. January is celebrated as Thyroid Disease Awareness Month, and we are following it judiciously. Next, we also celebrate a World Thyroid Day on 25th May. Hence, all these awareness months and awareness day indicate the gravity of the thyroid disorders which the population is facing, and we need to make the population aware. Most of the time, the thyroid disorders present with non-specific symptoms, and we need to catch them. Coming to the thyroid disorders proper, next, you can see they present as Hashimoto's disease, Graves' disease, thyroiditis, that is inflammation, or nodules or lobules, or thyroid cancers. Next. So there's a vast list of thyroid disorders which consists of low levels of hormones leading to hypothyroidism, increased level of hormones, hyperthyroidism, goiter, the enlarged gland, the thyroid nodules or thyroid cancers. Next. First and foremost, I would like to focus on hypothyroidism. This is the major thyroid disorder which we are facing in today's time. Most of the patients of thyroid disorders are basically hypothyroid. You can see how this is a long list on this screen. It is much more, but I have collected few conditions which are very common. Thyroiditis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis and Ort's thyroiditis both have an autoimmune basis. Postpartum thyroiditis, silent acute thyroiditis, Riedel's thyroiditis, iatrogenic hypothyroidism, post-operative hypothyroidism, medication-induced euthyroid 6 syndrome, and congenital hypothyroidism. Next, hyperthyroidism, when the body is producing too much thyroid hormone, more than the normal. Graves' disease, again an autoimmune condition. Toxic thyroid nodule, thyroid storm. This is an acute emergency condition where the patient thyroid levels are very high and patient presents with arrhythmias. Toxic nodular struma or Plumer's disease and Hashimoto's Next, structural abnormalities that we encounter in the thyroid gland is basically an abnormal enlargement, which can be in the form of a nodule, multiple nodules, or a diffuse enlargement. It is seen in endemic goiter, diffuse goiter, multinodular goiter, lingual thyroid, and thyroglossal duct cyst. In all these conditions, basically iodine deficiency is the cause. Next, mostly seen in the hilly areas where there is iodine deficiency. This is a classical picture of a diffuse enlargement of the thyroid gland, the goiter. Next slide, please. Next, medications are a major cause. Amiodarone, as I mentioned earlier, lithium salts, some types of interferon interleukin-2 leading to thyroiditis, glucocorticoids, dopamine antagonists, agonists, and somatostatin analogs all lead to hypothyroidism by blocking the thyroid stimulating hormone. This is the picture showing few features. There are important differentiating features in cases of hypothyroid, where the patient presents with hair loss, fatigue, sensitivity to cold, constipation, increased cholesterol, weight gain, dry skin. Most hypothyroid patients are heavy, and whereas hyperthyroid patient presents with fine brittle hair, trouble in sleep, excessive sweating, weight loss, high blood pressure, anxiety, and moist skin. Many a times the patients present with very non-specific symptoms, and the primary clinician is the one who has to keep a very high level of suspicion of thyroid disorders, mainly hypothyroidism, so that he can proceed further for the lab diagnosis of thyroid disorders. All thyroid disorders can be diagnosed, and there is a battery of tests, which includes medical history and physical examination. Clinical correlation with the blood tests or the thyroid function tests is mandatory, because many a times the tests can be discordant or ambiguous. So we need to correlate and then follow the guideline for management. Besides blood tests of thyroid hormones and thyroid stimulating hormone, there are tests to identify antibodies, antithyroglobulin, antithyroperoxidases, or TSH receptor stimulating antibodies. After the blood tests, imaging, ultrasound can be done. FNAC and biopsy is done for the final diagnosis. Radioiodine scanning and uptake studies are also a part of laboratory diagnosis. Next. I'm showing the thyroid stimulating hormone and free T4 and free T3 levels. The values vary from laboratory to laboratory and also from the test methodology that is used. TSH is the commonest screening test that can be used to further follow which test. This is a guide that which tests should be followed further. Thyroid stimulating hormone is a messenger hormone. That is, it takes the message from pituitary to the thyroid. And T4 is a storage hormone. Total T4 is a storage hormone. It stores the active T3 within it and releases it wherever required. T3 is the active hormone. These T4 and T3 are basically largely in bound forms. They are bound to several proteins, and very negligible amount, 1%, is free. This is the thyroid function test interpretation flow chart. As you can see, if you do a thyroid stimulating hormone test, blood test, TSH, and if the test is normal, okay, you can consider the patient normal. If the patient is otherwise normal clinically, but then only using a TSH as a screening test can misdiagnose a condition, or the condition can be totally missed. If the TSH is increased and you apply T4 test, then if it is increased, then that indicates secondary hyperthyroidism. But if the T4 hormone is reduced, it is primary hypothyroidism. If it is normal, then subclinical hyperthyroidism. Likewise, we follow the T3 hormone and the panel of TSH plus free T4 helps us to land to the diagnosis of most of the conditions. Besides thyroid function test, there is a comprehensive thyroid assessment test which can be done. This test involves, besides thyroid stimulating hormone, free T4, free T3, total T4 and T3 can also be done, reverse T3, and also antibodies to thyroglobulin and thyroid peroxidase. So the comprehensive thyroid assessment will help us to assess the central and peripheral both thyroid functions and also thyroid autoimmunity. Next. Sometimes when we are not able to land to a final diagnosis, we also need antibodies and thyroid binding proteins test to reach some conclusion. And the tests that are employed are thyroid peroxidase antibodies, as in cases of secondary hypothyroidism. Elevated, it is seen in women with postpartum thyroiditis. So we have to be cautious while interpreting these tests during pregnancy and postpartum, because the levels vary. We have to take care of all the proteins or globulins which are in circulation during the pregnancy period. Thyroid stimulating hormone receptor antibodies, thyroglobulin antibodies, then thyroid binding globulins, T3 resin uptake, free thyroxine index, and thyrotropin releasing hormones. These are additional special tests to diagnose a condition of thyroid disorder. Next. The American Association of Thyroid recommends that thyroid peroxidase levels should be done to evaluate subclinical hypothyroidism or nodular thyroid disease if it is due to autoimmunity. Sometimes when hyperthyroidism cause is not clear, then TSH receptor antibody can help us to land to the diagnosis. In Graves' disease, thyroid stimulating hormone receptor antibody levels are elevated. Next. A word of caution. Only a small fraction of circulating thyroid hormones are free or unbound. 99% are bound. It is only the free part which is biologically active. When we talk about thyroid hormones T3 and T4, they have two components. The bound one, which includes total and free both, and there is a partly free T3 and T4 component also. These are important because certain drugs and illnesses can affect the concentrations of the transport proteins. Hence, the values of total T4 and T3 will be affected. But free T3 and T4 levels are unaltered or unaffected by the binding proteins. FT4 levels tested in patients who have convincing symptoms of hyper and hypothyroidism will give a definite result despite a normal TSH. Next. For thyroid cancers, we have specific markers, thyroglobulin for papillary and follicular adenocarcinoma, and calcitonin, which is the third hormone secreted by C cells of the thyroid gland. This is a marker for medullary thyroid cancer. Various methodologies have been used for thyroid hormone testing. Radioimmunoassay, it is reliable. It gives quantitative results. It has highest sensitivity in euthyroid states, but it carries the hazard of a radioactive isotope. ELISA, solid phase sandwich ELISA, is used in many centers till date for quantitative antigen detection. Fluorescence immunoassay, Lateral flow chromatographic immunofluorescence assay is used in laboratories. Liquid chromatography, tandem mass spectrometry is also used. In our institution, and now chemiluminescence is a method to assess the thyroid function test, thyroid hormones, and its detection limit is 0.01 milli international units per liter. It has highest specificity and also a very good sensitivity. This flowchart will show how if TSH is used as a screening test and then we add T4 and T3 hormones, we can diagnose cases of hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism, and also borderline thyroid functions, that is subclinical hypo and hyperthyroidism. Next. This is just a small table. Interpretation of thyroid function tests require a lot of experience, high degree of clinical suspicion, clinical correlation, and other tests besides blood tests. But if thyroid stimulating hormone and free T4 and T3 are normal, of course, then patient most likely does not have any thyroid illness. I don't think so that I need to go through this. This chart is available everywhere, and all those who are doing the thyroid tests understand this chart. It's only in the cases of ambiguity, if the results are discordant, that we land up in doing further battery of tests. Else, clear-cut hypothyroidism or euthyroid conditions can be diagnosed by TSH and free T4. Else, TSH, T3, and T4 combination. Ultrasound is another entity to locate the nodules or demonstrate the nature of the nodule, be it solid, liquid, or mixed. You can see the pictures, how a thyroid scan is done. Another method is the radioiodine scanning and uptake using technetium-99m. Thyroid scintigraphy is imaged with radioactive iodine, usually iodine-123, which is not harmful. Rarely iodine-131 can be used, and this is done in the nuclear medicine department. Radioiodine collects in the thyroid gland before being excreted in the urine. While in the thyroid, the radioactive emissions can be detected by a camera, producing rough image of a shape, which we call as radioiodine scan, and also the tissue activity of the thyroid gland can be detected. Hot nodule, if it is producing large amounts of hormones, or cold nodule if the nodule is inactive or less amount of hormone is produced. Next. Again, this is a scintigram which is showing various forms of scan that you can see. Coming on to the various studies of the thyroid function tests and the thyroid dysfunction and its association with lifestyle. Yanling Yuang et al. In his cross-sectional epidemiological study found out that alcohol consumption is associated with reduced risk in hyperthyroidism. Reduced risk is alcohol consumption in a limited amount. Smoking was found to be a risk factor for development of Graves' hyperthyroidism, especially Graves' ophthalmopathy. Regular physical activity may be a protective factor for hypothyroidism, and starvation can cause hypothyroidism. These were the main features that he found out in his study. Still, the studies, linking studies with lifestyles are underway. Next. Soon and Ting in their research, thyroid diseases and diet control, found out that lifestyles, stress, and exposure to chemicals definitely pose a risk for thyroid disorders. Medication and surgery are used to treat or manage thyroid disorders. Dietary interventions can help in managing, controlling, and at times treating thyroid diseases. Diet should be soothing to the gut so as to reduce inflammation. It should restore digestive health and address autoimmune diseases. The entire aim of now the treatment for thyroid disorders are including a holistic approach, not only restricted to thyroid, but of the body as a whole. In another study, Velayutham, prevalence of thyroid dysfunction among young females in South India. He did the study in South India. He found out that thyroid dysfunction was common in young women in Madurai district in South India. And again, 1 out of every 8 women had abnormal TSH. That was what was predicted by the American Thyroid Association also. And mild TSH elevation was found in several females. In another study by T. Juro, prevalence of thyroid disease, thyroid dysfunction, and thyroid peroxidase antibodies in a large unselected population, he found out that in spite of high prevalence of thyroid diseases, considerable number of inhabitants have undiagnosed thyroid dysfunction, and they are also positive to certain antibodies like thyroid peroxidase antibody. So still, though the incidence of thyroid disorders is on the rise, the incidence of undiagnosed thyroid disorders still remain large. And this is the population that we should aim at for management and treatment. Next. So besides the treatment modality, we follow medications, we follow surgery, we follow radiation therapy. Simple lifestyle changes are recommended for a healthy thyroid. Next. It has been found that hypothyroidism, which is a very common disorder, can be managed and controlled, but many a times cannot be cured, except in small conditions like postpartum thyroiditis, etc. They can be cured completely. So lifestyle modification is now an added modality of management for a holistic treatment of thyroid. It includes natural foods, balanced diet, exercise, meditation, and yoga, which has been emphasized and has been found to be useful in all the diseases of civilization. Less sugar, all the white enemies that we call sugar, salt, and maida, they should be restricted, and iodine-rich foods, supplements should be taken, such as seafood, salt, seaweed, dairy products, etc. Diet should be gluten-free or limit the gluten diet. Vitamin B complex, selenium, trace elements, these are required for the synthesis of thyroid hormones. Their supply should be maintained. Low alcohol and smoking should be avoided. No foods are soy-based, cruciferous vegetables, processed foods, etc., like cabbage and broccoli. Jen Whitman, who is a creator of Thyroid Loving Care, and he's a certified holistic health expert. He says, in my experience, changing the diet, gut health, stress level, and fitness of a person helps support the body so that medication is unnecessary or minimum and can work more effectively. Again, he is emphasizing on the holistic approach of treatment to the thyroid disorders. Next. This is all about the thyroid disorders and the challenges that we are facing, and lifestyle changes will definitely help control and cure thyroid disorders. Thank you so much for patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. I mean to say, you have dedicated so much of what you can say effort in highlighting the flowchart actually. Okay, and you have actually connected the dots, which has not been what you can say answered properly. I am pretty sure now the people have understood this. There are a few questions which are lined up for you, ma'am. The first thing is that people are asking, like you have mentioned in one of your slides about the diagnostic procedure. You have said about the battery of tests, and you have emphasized clearly about the blood sample being the potent one for the diagnosis of thyroid diseases. Now, having said that, ma'am, in a country which is so wide and which is having so much of diversity, which particular test would you recommend as the gold standard, preliminary for the screening purposes, ma'am? If not for the acute or chronic infections, ma'am, whatever it is.
Yeah. See, a person approaching a primary physician, the best test should be one, a thyroid stimulating hormone, which is the screening test, along with free T4 hormone test. This will help us, guide us to proceed further, and will diagnose primary hypothyroidism or subclinical hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism and help us to proceed further. And this is the smallest, or you can say the most economical test that we can do.
Ma'am, like FNAC and biopsy has been what you can say the choice of all the pathologists across the country. Ma'am, now having said that, you have wide spectrum of patients coming to you, be it women And nowadays, unfortunately, a large fragment of the patients are from the pediatric domain also. So would you recommend FNAC and biopsy to those patients also, or would you stick to the blood samples, ma'am?
If there is a nodule that we can aspirate, I would definitely suggest fine needle aspiration cytology. It is an OPD procedure. It is very safe, and it gives diagnosis in many cases. So because blood tests alone may not suffice in many conditions. It is only if the blood tests are not guiding us, then we can go for FNSE, and there is no problem at all in FNSE. First should be the blood tests, followed by FNSE when and wherever required. Biopsy, I don't think so. For pediatric patients, we are not doing it, biopsy. But if it is required, then it is ultimate final diagnostic gold standard test.
I understand, ma'am, because coronidal biopsy is considered to be the gold standard. I agree to that. Ma'am, there are many people who are asking one special question to you. How frequent in Indian population should a thyroid test be recommended?
As far as the American Thyroid Association and American Association of Endocrine Clinicians, they say that after 35 years of age, they should do. Although now they don't stick to it. Looking at the Indian scenario, a vast population and economic constraints, I feel that keeping a high clinical index of suspicion, basic tests like TSH and free T3, T4 should be done only when you suspect hypothyroidism or any thyroid disorder. But as we have packages, healthcare packages, I think the population that can afford the tests are getting themselves annually screened for it.
Ma'am, a fine line of benchmark has been created between what you do in terms of aspirations, what you do in terms of the ones which can be available to the primary health centers, ma'am. Now you have also mentioned about fluorescence immunoassay, you have mentioned about ELISA and CLIA. Now talking about all the infrastructure and all the costing which is involved in these tests, which particular test would you recommend in a country like India where at least the common mass can definitely go and have access to these kind of tests, ma'am?
If the person is able to come to a center like this or a city, I think we can start with ELISA. We can start with, and depending on since we don't have a very fixed value amount, whatever the person can approach to, ELISA, be it ELISA or be it immunofluorescence or be it chemiluminescence, according to affordability, he can choose a test, and the results are definitely guiding and they are good. So need not worry. Whichever method we can use, but they should be affordable to the patient, and patient can decide upon it, or a clinician can guide to him according to his condition.
Ma'am, one of our doctors who is there in our audience, ma'am, they have asked, like, talking about the autoimmune thyroiditis and the complications associated with it. So what are the precautions and the following treatment for this kind of a condition, ma'am?
As we all know that autoimmune conditions, a person who is prone to autoimmune conditions has sometimes other comorbid autoimmune conditions also. So if there is an associated known autoimmune condition, first thing will be to control the same, to control or treat the same or manage the same. That will help the person. The thyroid disorder also will be controlled. And then all the precautions that are associated with the autoimmune conditions, if they are prone to certain allergies and all, they have to keep away from it. That's the only way. And as and when required, treatment has to be taken. They have to be in touch with their clinicians.
Ma'am, there has been 2 slides where you have actually spoken about the gospel truth, which has been mandated by the American Association, and also with respect to the case study where you have highlighted the current scenario that 1 in 8 women are prone to thyroid diseases in the world as of now. So there is hardly any difference between the global or the Indian scenario. Now talking about it, ma'am, I think you have actually highlighted one particular pedigree that is about autoimmunity, that how it has been, what you can say, been vulnerable, like autoimmune diseases as well as comorbid conditions have been responsible for the influx of thyroid diseases. So how do you see that? Where are we reaching in the near future?
Although I didn't get your question, but what I understand is that there are studies, there is a big question why thyroid disorders are more common in women. No definite answer has been so far given, but the links have been connected with the autoimmunity and the hormonal changes, the swaying hormonal changes that a female is subjected to throughout her life, right from menarche, then pregnancy, then postpartum, and then menopause. That is one thing. And autoimmunity as such is also reported more frequently in females. They are inherently prone to autoimmune diseases and thereby now prone to thyroid disorders.
Ma'am, there are a few people who are asking, like, we are living already in a pandemic, and thankfully now the vaccination has started. It's a two-part question. The first part, they're asking that although till now, whatever the case studies you have shown and the comorbidities which you have depicted, it talks about Graves' disease, it talks about diabetes and all those things. So is there any relation with COVID also? I'm going to say, like, it's a very challenging question, I can understand.
It's a very good question that this thing came up. Yes, now I'm thinking why I didn't think about it. Yes, see, COVID is this viral pandemic is now 10 months old, as far as we know. So I think we should observe it. In this light, we should keep observing it, and final results we will come to know over a period of time. Right now, I have not read, I have not gone through it, or I'm not aware that COVID has some relation to it or not. But I think we can observe it for a few more months or few years and find out if there is any correlation.
Ma'am, there are people who are asking, like, since we are living in a tropical country and we are susceptible to so many, what you can say, diseases, what is the effect of antiviral drugs per se in terms of comorbidities and in terms of treatment of thyroid diseases as a whole, ma'am?
Antiviral drugs. I need to read about it. I'm not very much aware about how antiviral drugs are affecting these disorders.
Okay, ma'am, the last question is there. Ma'am, you have spoken about gluten-free diet. You have advocated the use of it, ma'am. Now, obviously, in our last session, actually, we took up one of our the potent topic about celiac, actually. Okay. So now a lot has been spoken about celiac and stunted growth and malnutrition. So now if I talk about with respect to the comorbidities and the dietary implications, which you have also highlighted. So how do you think that these two diseases are related in Indian population, ma'am?
Gluten allergies are now prevalent, more prevalent, or I think they are detected now more frequently. So it is a well-known entity that gluten protein is definitely allergic to many. So, and hence, since it is causing not only the diseases in the GIT, but indirectly it is also associated with now thyroid disorders. And in both the conditions, dietary alterations or dietary checks or dietary control help to control and at times treat the diseases. So we have to keep this in mind that a large population is allergic to the gluten protein. Hence, if any thyroid disorder, suppose if comes up, then one should also look for gluten allergy and gluten diet restriction.
That's, I mean, to say, you have actually answered everything, ma'am, with terms of the hormonal levels also in terms of the implications. So I think the people have definitely, what you can say, been made more aware of what are the challenges lying ahead. And I think no one can argue that lifestyle does play an important role in terms of what you can say, maintaining a proper healthy thyroid levels. And in a country like India, where we are prone to more diseases than anybody else, I mean to say, no one can argue that, yes, we are much more vulnerable than anyone else. So I really thank you for the effort, ma'am. Now, as a token of appreciation, ma'am, just allow me to share, ma'am, we do have a certificate of appreciation for you, ma'am, for all your efforts, ma'am. So I really can't thank you enough for the time and the efforts which you have taken for this particular uh, webinar, ma'am. So this is your token of appreciation from our side, ma'am. So well-deserved presentation and all the knowledge sharing what you have done, ma'am. So we really look forward to have you on board and in our future assignments and webinars, and would like to know more from you, ma'am. And to all our participants, I would just like to put across that this particular session will be put on the YouTube. So please stay tuned with our company channel on YouTube. There are a lot more company success and customer success videos which are posted, and we would have a next J-MITRA scientific seminar in February. So we will be posting links about that. So thank you, Dr. Srivastav. Thank you for your time and patience. And thank you to all the participants.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thanks to you, Dr. Ghosh and J-MITRA. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a nice day.